The four candidates to be the next Liberal leader have their first debate tonight in Montreal. Recent polling suggests Liberal support has gone up since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's resignation, with a specific bump in Quebec. Tonight's debate takes place in Montreal, where there will be a spotlight on the candidates' abilities to perform in French. Here for a snapshot on the province, Sébastien Dallaire is the Executive Vice President of Eastern Canada for Léger Polling. Sébastien Dallaire, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So you have some polling out which suggests the Liberals under Mark Carney would actually be ahead in Quebec. Carney would lead over Pierre Poilievre by almost double. He would be ahead of the Bloc Québécois by fairly significant numbers. I'm old enough to remember a few polls ago where the Liberals were in third place. I mean, what accounts for this change? Why the infatuation with Mark Carney in Quebec?
It is indeed a very spectacular change. And I don't know if I would say yet that it's infatuation. I think Mark Carney right now, and same as we're measuring also in Ontario, we see a similar bump in Ontario and in other parts of the country. Mark Carney has somewhat of a double advantage in the current context. And again, it's the current context. Like Donald Trump is really is kind of a Trump eclipse right now in the media, and it's all about who's going to be in the best position to deal with Donald Trump and potentially deal with economic difficulties. And of course, Mark Carney has, one, a very strong economic background, but right. In addition to that, contrary to what, say, Chrystia Freeland, he's also a bit of an outsider. Even though he's been in and around Ottawa and the Liberal Party for a while, he's not part of cabinet. He comes from outside, and this is a change election, and so he could still be seen as a change candidate. At least right now, that seems to be profiting him.
It's remarkable, someone who is a central banker in 2 G7 countries and reportedly been offered cabinet posts by Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Harper can be seen as an outsider, right? But these are the political times we're in. So, okay, infatuation is maybe too strong a word, but we're looking at a 43% support in Quebec with Mark Carney as leader, according to your data. That is a big shift. I mean, what are we talking about there in terms of seats? I mean, they just lost a Saint-Léonard to the Bloc last summer. It seems like all of that gets, or last fall, that all gets changed, right?
Yeah, with those numbers, again, there are a lot of ifs, because that would be at the end of the electoral campaign. So there are a lot of questions to be answered still. But right now, they would need at capturing potentially a majority of seats in the province with those kinds of numbers. So that's quite the reversal from the narrative only 2 months ago, where the feeling was that the Liberals would lose a lot of seats, not just in Quebec, but in many other areas of the country. So now it's a completely different discussion. The big now question mark, and we'll see what tonight will play a role in this, is can Mark Carney transform what is now kind of a positive predisposition, I would say, on the part of Quebec voters, turn this into actual support come election time?
Okay,
that's the big question.
That is, and that was going to be my next question, because the concern you hear from Liberals is that Mr. Carney's French is obviously weaker than Justin Trudeau's, maybe weaker than the other contenders for the leadership. Now, I know Conservative leaders have not always had the best French. Mr. Harper, but his power base was Western Canada and Ontario. The Liberals need Quebec, right? There's no path forward for them. So how important is this for Mark Carney this evening in terms of delivering a reassuring message to Quebecers on his language skills?
It is obviously very important, but I would say it's less about the specific language skills as much as about showing that he can connect with French voters. So however he enunciates a few words, and some mistakes won't play as big of a role as to show that he understands Quebec culture and society. And the fact that he has a, fairly big caucus, and he has a strong presence with a lot of cabinet members from the province will help him as he goes along. But tonight is about showing that he gets it. He gets French voters. He gets how to connect with them. And obviously voters, it's going to be the first time that they really have a chance to hear him live and see how he can think on his feet in French.
So
That's a challenge. It's your second language.
Absolutely. I mean, but so how do you demonstrate that connection then? Because a lot of the analysis, I suspect, will look at the quality of the spoken French, right? The syntax, the grammar, the use of colloquial phrases or not. But, you seem less focused on that and more about the substance and intention of what he's saying. What are the sort of things you need to do to show that sort of connection?
Well, both are going to be important. I'm not saying it's not important how well he
Of course.
speaks. Of course it is, but it's not just about that. It's also about is he able to include in there some sentences or elements that shows that he understands Quebec, that he understands what the culture is about, without sounding like it's kind of pre-planned. Is he able to improvise and introduce some of his knowledge of Quebec, some of his knowledge of Canadian francophones in general? That's what will make a difference. It needs to feel and sound genuine, because francophones are very sensitive to that. And we can think of, for example, Jack Layton scored huge success. His French was definitely better, but it wasn't perfect. But it didn't matter too much for Quebec voters.
Yeah, I wonder about that, because it is rare to see a Liberal leadership race without a single Francophone candidate, right? It's not only the question of none of them have it really as their first language. And I wonder, how does that play in the larger picture? Because there's 4 power bases for the Liberal government: Atlantic Canada, Quebec, the GTA, and the Lower Mainland of British Columbia. Your polling suggests they're doing better in Ontario, Quebec, and the Atlantic with a hypothetical Carney leadership. But how does the absence of a Francophone contender, never mind a Quebec contender like Dominic LeBlanc didn't run, how does that affect the dynamic in Quebec?
It of course it plays a role. Then that's where the strength of the Quebec team plays a big role. And we can think, you mentioned earlier Stephen Harper. Like in 2008, Stephen Harper was on his way to potentially winning a lot of seats in Quebec, despite the fact that his French wasn't that solid. He didn't feel that comfortable, because at that time we had really made a big effort to try to connect with Quebec voters, on his way to succeeding, until cuts to cultural funding and some comments about artists at galas derailed the campaign. But he was on his way to doing very well, based on having a local team and really showing that he cared about Quebec, spent a lot of time here. So it's possible to do it despite not being from Quebec.
I wonder, your polling and these latest Leger numbers, they are in line with what we're seeing as a trend for most of the national polling firms, that there's a generic tightening and there's a specific tightening when Mr. Carney's name is added into it, almost being neck and neck. A lot of people say this is just a dead cat bounce. Others compare it to the Kamala Harris sort of sugar high when she replaced Joe Biden. What's your sense of it? Is there something beyond just Trump and his disruptive nature that's driving all of this? Like, how solid is it, do you think?
It's a combination of a few things, but Trump is clearly the main factor right now, because we're seeing a Trump effect in everything we're polling on. So it's not just federal voting intentions. We see it provincially as well. We see the role it's playing in the Ontario election right now. So there is a Trump effect everywhere, for sure. But Mark Carney also has a bit of an advantage compared to other candidates, because he can also talk about being a candidate for change. We know that in the past couple of years, Pierre Poilievre has had a lot of success by attacking Justin Trudeau more personally, and then really Justin Trudeau was embodying what Canadians were angry about. But now he's leaving, and being able to have someone that can talk about change makes a big difference. And Mark Carney has more credibility because he wasn't part of the cabinet in recent years.
So just as a final point, Sébastien, on all of that, none of the polling I have seen shows that Chrystia Freeland moves the needle in the way Mark Carney moves the needle. Same with Karina Gould, Frank Baylis. I mean, is it just too difficult for anyone who is a senior member of the government and of the cabinet to capture the mood that's out there right now? I mean, is there anything that can happen in this debate tonight that could change the dynamic for the other candidates, in your view?
Well, I mean, I could use the old phrase, it's not over till it's over.
Yes.
But right now, Mark Carney has a definite advantage by all measure. But yeah, could certainly happen. A tough performance tonight, and then someone else really shines. It could change the dynamic of the race for sure. We know debates have the potential to do this. In general, they tend to confirm predispositions, but we've seen debates that really change the nature of a race. So we'll see how it goes tonight. So it's definitely an important debate, no matter how we look at it.
Look, after the Joe Biden-Donald Trump debate, I'm not going to rule anything out anymore. We've learned a lot of lessons in the past year. Sébastien Dallaire, the Executive Vice President of Eastern Canada for Leger. We appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.